Got it, Captain. Sorry.
All right, can I call this meeting to order, please? Monday, August 14th, special school board meeting. Member Oswald, would you call the roll, please?
Member Harlow's going to be late, I believe. Member Johnston. Member Kirby. Chair Kirby. Member Laffer-Kemp. Member me, yes. Member Sandstead. Here. Member Welty.
Here.
Superintendent Gronsa.
Here.
Deputy Clerk Doug Hassler.
Here.
Secretary Jackie Dolans. Here. And student reps are excused, so we're all good.
We have a quorum. Thank you. First, the next item on the agenda is audience participation related to the agenda items before. Bogdana, you'll have to use one of those microphones and just push the button and it will allow you to be amplified. There we go.
Hi, my name is Bogdana Krivogorsky, or Dana Krivogorsky, and as many of you know that I'm running for the school board at large. And I'm kind of glad that I'm very excited about today's agenda for the board meeting. So I dedicated extraordinary amount of time to look through the past paperwork, and I met regarding the budget with few members of the board, Member Kirby and Superintendent, and we discussed it. And after that, I dived myself into the studying the paperwork, whatever was publicly available to me. Once again, I don't have access to all of the paperwork as a member of the public, but I did have access to some documentation. And what I have found out that our schools are, and it's no surprise to anybody that our schools in a dire need of cash, that the cash flow is not very fluent, shall we say, for the lack of the better word. So one of the propositions that I have had, and maybe members and the superintendent or the honorable members of the board will consider, is basically seek help from the outside. There are the companies, and I know that we do have the regular audits from the WIPFLE, but maybe there's a need of the second opinion. And some companies, some accounting companies would do it basically, well, they wouldn't do it for free, but they would do it for the payment of the percentage recovered. And such world-renowned companies as KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have offices in Minneapolis. And they're not just in Minneapolis, they're basically world-renowned, they're world standard. So after the collapse of Enron, as everybody knows, and Andersen ceased to exist, those companies really took up the place and set up a new golden standard. So given their opportunity, maybe the school board might consider that, especially right now, in a situation, in the strapped cash and the cuts that needed to be done, and I said through the meetings, through all the spring, where it was decided, maybe there is an opportunity to take a look the second time around for the second opinion. My grandmother said, we are not rich enough to buy crap, and the greedy person pays twice. So maybe it's worth to look at this world-renowned, incredible companies who would do basically for the percentage of the money recovered. We're not losing anything. And I have the list of them, to which my son earlier spilled some drink, so I apologize for the sad state of this piece of paper. But there is addresses and phone numbers. So this is just an idea, and I think it relates to this agenda very well and straightforward. So if I can, that's all I have to say, and if I can pass it on, and I would greatly appreciate oh, Jackie. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. There are no other audience members wishing to speak. We'll proceed. The first item on our agenda is Resolution B 817-3471. Mr. Hassler, would you like to briefly update us on this?
I'd be happy to do that, and really I'll really reference both of the resolutions. It's not too complicated. Basically, towards the end of May, we conducted a special board meeting for the purpose of proposing financing for improvements primarily at Rockridge School, but also at Lakewood to replace the roof. And that financing was proposed with an authorization that would remain in effect until August 15th. A quick look at the calendar will tell you that tomorrow is August 15th, and we have not sold bonds yet. We do have approval from Minnesota Department of Education to sell bonds, so that's certainly good news. We are in what we hope are in the process of working with the City of Duluth to modify the zoning for the Rockridge property, which is really a critical step for us to take so that we would go forward with the improvements that need to happen at that building to bring that building back into operation as a school. Tonight, the Duluth City Council has a meeting where they will be taking up that proposed zoning change on first reading. We're hoping that will go well tonight, and if it does, then it would be on the agenda once again on August 28th. So we're not in a position to sell bonds before August 15th. And so the amending resolutions that are before you tonight would extend that authorization through the end of October. End of October is what I would consider to be far more time than what we are hoping to need, but I didn't want to put us in a position of coming back to you in a month to say, we're almost there, but we haven't sold bonds yet. So the idea is to extend the authorization out through the end of October and allow our process to run its course with the City of Duluth, and then take the necessary steps to issue the bonds in due course.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to pass these first resolution, B 817-3471?
I so move.
Moved by Member Welty, seconded by Member Sandsted. Any discussion on this? Member Welty.
Mr. Hassler, quick question. We are having to go to the city to ask for zoning. We do not know if they will approve this or not. It has to be the city council, I believe, that from my reading, that makes the okay. The planning commission has the planning commission made a ruling at this point or not?
They did a week ago, and it was approved in the planning commission unanimously. So
Okay.
we're taking that as a good sign, but there are no guarantees when you go through this process.
I do have a question about the past here. Did we actually request that the city change the zoning? Had we not asked for help from the city to make our properties more attractive to potential buyers? Did we originally have the zoning as a school that we are now seeking once again?
The zoning was changed a few years ago, and it was changed with our participation. It was changed in a fashion that we effectively requested at that time, because at that time we had no plans to operate a school there. And the general zoning category that we're talking about here permits a school to operate, but when we were working through that process with the city, I think it's fair to say that it was at our initiative that use was removed for that property because we were expecting to sell it. And so we are coming back around to a point in time where we do have need to use that property as a school. From the overall standpoint of what permissible uses would be in that type of zoning, a school use is permitted, except that was not included in the structure of what was proposed when we went through this with the city the last time.
If I could just continue with an observation and maybe a question. I know that the neighborhood around the Rockridge has been very concerned about the use of that facility. They effectively halted one potential purchase that we made. My sense was that when there was another prospective client, Many Rivers Academy, that there was a lot of interest in seeing that proceed because the neighborhood felt that would have been a good use for that facility. Do you have any sense now whether the neighborhood has any objections or any loud objections to our making this change and returning this back to school purposes?
I know that staff for the city have met with residents from that area and have heard their concerns. Among their concerns would be perhaps some installation of some fencing or some landscaping to define, what the limits of the school property would be, maybe some signage. I can tell you that in the Plan Commission meeting a week ago, when there was opportunity for public comment, there was no public comment, pro or con. Certainly we were there and we introduced the proposed zoning, but there were no negative comments brought in at that time.
Well, I'd just make one other observation, that is, it is a little disconcerting that a property that we probably had an opportunity to sell ended up being passed on, and they purchased the property that's requiring the Hills community to establish this as their new property. So it's a couple $1 million that perhaps didn't need to be expended, but it's for a good purpose. And I wish you the best of luck persuading the City Council to go through with this.
Any other comment? Member Oswald?
I have just a couple of questions. Am I accurate in knowing that we're applying for special school status instead of just a regular school status? And can you tell me the differences between a special school zoning and a regular school zoning?
At the recommendation of city planning officials, the designation that they have proposed to us is a specialized school use, and so I would say that's not a typical school zoning. It doesn't define it as an elementary school. It doesn't define it as a secondary school. The specialized zoning would really allow us to educate students from either elementary or secondary school age. And again, a school use in that zoning in the big picture is permitted. It was just in the mechanics of the last process that we did have involvement in, that use was removed. And so it's not an inconsistent use. Some of the other uses that are permitted in that zoning would allow a government building. It would allow a fire station. I'm not suggesting that use, but there are other uses that are public building type uses, and certainly a school is different than other public buildings. But that's what we're looking at.
And then to follow up, I know there were limitations in the previous zoning before the special school status, such as the property will only be able to be used during business hours up to 4:30, from what I imagine, and that a cap is being placed on the enrollment with the special school status. And then there was something else about water runoff that needs to be resolved before occupancy can happen, or their certificate of occupancy can be given to us. Is that going to all be resolved in time for us to remodel?
It will be, and the water runoff is an issue to the extent that the property is there in its current state today, and as part of our plans to make improvements at that building and on the grounds of that building, we were already anticipating addressing that issue.
And so, do we anticipate being open by the January 1st deadline that's going to be imposed on us by Woodland Hills?
That is our goal.
And you still anticipate that we're going to meet that goal?
We will do everything possible to meet that goal.
Thank you.
Member Johnston.
Well, thank you, Chair. The question, looking at the Rock Ridge website, they send us these links all the time, and one of the things I've seen in there, which I hadn't really asked about before, but I thought it would be kind of appropriate to ask now, was about the size of the property, and how many acres it is, and they talked about issues of parking. They also said, I think as we all know, they seem to be in support of this, which is good, but some of those issues were come up, and I hadn't asked about that, and it does seem like the remaining property is kind of small. How many acres is the remaining property?
I don't I don't know off the top of my head. Dave Spooner was otherwise engaged this afternoon. He would probably have more information on that.
Is one of the things that they had talked about, and I think, if I recall right, didn't we get some letter a couple months ago from one of the property owners that we sold some of our property to, and they seem to be somewhat irate. And is there any possibility, is it ever in the books? I'm not advocating this, but I'm just wondering if there is talk about us or the Hills purchasing some of the property that other people had purchased from us, and that would add to the acreage, add to the, as I understand, that they don't have a soccer field anymore that was apparently sold. I guess I'm just trying to see a little bit of some of that background stuff.
For the use that we are planning to make of this property, I think the property is the size that it needs to be. There were some questions raised as to parking. We think we will have sufficient parking to cover the parking needs at that building. While it's going to be a specialized school program, it's going to be a little bit different from the respect that we're going to be transporting all the students into the building in the morning. We're going to be transporting them in the afternoon. There won't be the same flow of traffic into and out of the property that we would have at a typical building. And we are creating some additional parking on the property to meet the needs that exist. We do not have a need to purchase any additional property to accomplish our educational goals for that property.
Member Liflican?
Sure. I just wanted to clarify or add a little background. When Rockridge was closed and we were going through the rezoning process, we did work very closely with then City Councilor Jen Julesworld on that, as well as community members. And the current City Councilor, Gary Anderson, has been appraised of this all along. I've been in contact with him, and what he is hearing, as well as some other at-large city councilors, is support for this. And all of us did receive, before the planning committee meeting, the For Rockridge update that they put out, and they invited people who wanted to speak at the planning commission meeting. So that was out there before the planning commission meeting last week as well. And as I've been out and about in my neighborhood, which is just a few blocks away from this, there is support for it. There's some questions, but there is support that this is going to stay a school. When people understand how the kids are going to be bused in and kind of the staffing levels, I think that people just want to make sure they're kind of clear on how this would be different than a traditional school where parents would be dropping off and picking up kids all the time, like that happens at many of our schools. So just, to let you know, like we did back then with the zoning, the current city councilor for that area is abreast of it, and if he gets questions, he does contact me or other people to get appropriate answers as well. And I believe, was it David Spooner who also met with the For Rockridge folks, with some city folks?
I don't believe Dave has been involved in any meetings with the residents of the neighborhood. I know he's had multiple meetings with staff for the planning commission. Okay.
And
I know the staff did meet with area residents.
Right. I remember reading that, and as did Carrie Leiter many times over the years since Rockridge was sold. So thank you for those updates, Mr. Hassler.
Seeing no other lights, maybe we should not read this whole resolution. We haven't done that. Member Sanchez, could you read the first paragraph and the last paragraph? Maybe that would, the whole thing will be on the record. So
sure. Whereas the School Board of Independent School District Number 709, Duluth, located in St. Louis County, Minnesota, approved on May 30th, 2017, Resolution B-5-17-3450 regarding the issuance of General Obligations Facilities Maintenance Bond, Series 2017A. And now therefore, be it resolved by the Board of the District that Section 3.05 of the resolution be amended in its entirety to provide as follows. 3.05, if the pricing committee has not approved the sale of the bonds to Northland and executed the related bond purchase agreement by October 31, 2017, this resolution shall expire.
Thank you. And the whole resolution is available in the record. So it's been moved and seconded to pass this resolution. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then it passes 6-0 with Member Harla absent but now present. Thank you. Now we move on to the next resolution, which is Resolution B 817-3472. This is just a different series, the same resolution. Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Moved by Member Sanford, the second? Seconded by Member Lafleur-Kent. Any discussion on this resolution? It's page 6 of the... perhaps, Member Welty, can you read the first and last paragraphs of that resolution?
Oh, I had a question.
Oh, you have a question? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't see that.
Yeah, I heard you said it was a different series. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay, I was looking at the wrong page. This is 17A, 17B. I might ask this question. We've got several others here. One of them has to do with the $615,000 for the, well, this is Brock Ridge. All of these essentially are the same thing. They're all designed to to give us an exit if we don't get the city's help or bonds taken care of. Is all four of these resolutions essentially set up like that?
Well, two of the resolutions were approved by this board back in May.
Okay.
And then today we have two amending resolutions to amend those original resolutions just with respect to the expiration date.
Okay.
There are two bond issues because one of them is basically LTFM, long-term facilities and maintenance, which has certain standards and requirements as to what monies can be expended for, which is basically replacing existing facilities and recognizing things that require repair. And those costs that are not eligible for LTFM fall into the capital facilities, and that's just relating to improvements that we need to make in the building that don't have anything to do with repair. It may involve subdividing a classroom space to be appropriate for the instruction of the students in the Hills program, which is different than what we might have had in that building in the past. But that's not a wall that needs to be replaced. It's a new wall entirely, so that's not an eligible LTFM expense.
Okay. I'm just trying to get the sense of all four of these. Very good. That's my...
So this is now.
Yeah, and that was them.
Question, I would read it.
Okay. I just do the first and the last.
This is four.
It's on page 6, yeah.
Yeah, 7, 6, okay. 6 starts with a whereas.
Right. And then
Whereas, the school board, the Board of Independent School District Number 709, Duluth, located in St. Louis County, Minnesota, the district approved on May 30th, 2017, Resolution B-5-17-3451 regarding the issuance of general obligation capital facilities bonds, Series 2017B, and
I would go down to the last whereas.
And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of the District that the Section 305 of the resolution be amended in its entirety to provide as follows. 3.05, if the pricing committee has not approved the sale of the bonds to Northland and executed the related bond purchase agreement by October 31st, 2017, this resolution shall expire. Chairman, I move Resolution B-8-17-3472, dated August 14th.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor of this resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 6-0. All right. The last item is informational on the debt restructuring resolution. I believe there is a letter in our packet, and would you like to speak to that briefly?
I'd be happy to. The memo that I provided to you is really an update on activities that have been undertaken since the board approved the long-range facilities planning project, the debt restructuring resolution that was approved back in the month of June. As the board knows, there are basically two components to that resolution. The one component was focused on the board's support for legislation that would allow for the payment of our certificates of participation that are currently paid out of the general fund to be paid out of a source other than general fund. And secondly, the other initiative from the resolution was to encourage the administration and any advisors any legal or financial advisors that we're working with to seek out alternatives to the present debt repayment structure that currently exists. Since that resolution has been approved, I've reached out to another financial planning organization within the state of Minnesota, and that is PFM. And I've shared the resolution that the board approved with them, and have sought their assistance in identifying options that might exist to move forward with the direction established by the board. And really tonight I want to emphasize kind of where we are at this point in time, and at this point in time what we've been able to identify as to the first option, which is what other source exists to pay the COPs out of other than general fund. And based upon our best understanding and research, the only option would be really for those payments to occur out of our debt service fund. Although I do want to emphasize that that's not an option that exists today. Under current law, what would have to happen to allow payments to be made out of our debt service fund rather than our general fund for those three COP issues would be, number one, if we were to conduct a successful referendum that the community would support to approve that shift, that would give us a basis to make those payments out of debt service fund. Absent that, the only way that we could make those payments out of our debt service fund would be if there would be a change in the state law that would allow that shift to occur in the absence of a referendum. So just to focus on that one specific goal, what I would want to say is that if we're talking about a referendum for that purpose, there is certainly no sure thing, no guaranteed process when you go through a referendum. No guarantee as to what the outcome will be. Secondly, if it is necessary to change state law on that point to allow for a shift without a referendum being conducted, it's not clear that there's legislative support among our area legislators, or certainly around legislators around the state of Minnesota. And finally, what I want to make sure the board is aware of, and I'm sure you are, is that we are approaching a point in time when we're going to need to evaluate what our future needs are for our operating levy, which will be expiring after next year. And so to the extent we're talking about a referendum and or a change in the law that would allow for a shift of payments to land in our debt service fund, I would ask that the board weigh very carefully whether or not it's consistent for us to be doing that shift at the same point in time that we're going to be perhaps going to the community to seek support for a future operating levy. There's another goal here which I'd be happy to go on to, but before I do that, I welcome any comment that the board might have as to that first goal.
Member Welty.
I'm going to have an observation here in a moment, but I have a question on the operating levy. How much is the current operating levy that's been approved? How much is the operating levy?
It's about $795 a student. So that's a sliding scale based upon whatever our student population is.
Times about 8,000 kids, what would that be? 8 million? No.
Well, and to complicate things a little bit, part of that levy has been shifted over to, I think, what the state refers to as local option, which is about $424 a student. So that effectively reduces the amount of money that is in jeopardy based upon the next referendum. So we're talking about a number that's somewhere between $300 and $350 a student.
Here's my observation, and it's one of the reasons why I'm particularly interested in having somebody else take a look at our finances. As near as I can tell, basically our levy, what we take from the community, is $31 million. And as near as I can tell, $28.5 million of that or something like that goes to pay off debt. Some of it general obligation bonds, and some of it these certificates of participation. I think the certificates of participation were basically a means by which we could pay off the red plant buildings, and the public had been told that there was going to be great savings if we just went around and built the red plant buildings. But in fact, what we've done basically is we've lowered the amount of money that goes into the general fund or the classroom from 20 years ago when I was first on the school board by about $11 million, maybe $11.5 million. And I think right now only about maybe $2.5 million of what we levy the public goes into the classroom, which is a pittance I doubt if any other school district in the state is at. And whoever talked us into going into the certificate of participation based upon savings that I don't think ever materialized, so that we've had to increase class size, did us no favors. And the public, of course, had no say in any of these things. And you are quite right to express concern about how the public will take this if we change the funding and put the money back into the classroom that we never should have taken out to begin with. What will that mean for the future operational levies? I'm still looking for some outside help. I encountered a name from the past in the news recently, and this name is Michael Hoheisel, I believe, who was one of the people who gave us a portion of a new review and comment that we sent to the state that ended up leading to the certificates of participation. And I've discovered that his name has been associated with a couple of unflattering stories with other school districts who've done similar sorts of financing. And I'm really curious about, how things got to be the way they were, because somehow the state legislature, which is quite right to be suspicious of our trying to get past our voters, had a law that allowed us to do just that. But boy, it's doing nothing for us. And the suggestion by Mrs. Krivogorsky about looking at options and other accountants, I find very appealing. So I don't have any recommendations. I think you've pretty well persuaded me, Mr. Haskell, that we don't have an awful lot of options. But that doesn't mean that I'm not interested in having somebody else do some digging, and maybe some people that we haven't used in the past. So those are some observations that are probably unnecessary, but it's what I'll be thinking about till our next board meeting.
Member Oswald?
You mentioned PFM. Is that an acronym, or I don't know or have heard of them. I know we have PMA and now we have PFM. And so is there some info about them?
Public finance, I don't know what the M stands for. They do a lot of work in the state of Minnesota. They do work around the country.
Okay. And I know you have detailed what we know we can do. I believe when I spoke to this resolution in June, I was talking that, we may not have anything known that what we can do, but we need to create something that we can do and think outside the box. So much so as you yourself has mentioned, advocating and changing state law somehow, some way. I think we have the time to work together with our state legislatures to create something that solves our problem, because our problem is unique. Not a lot of school districts are having this particular issue, and I don't know what the answer is. I have no idea, but I think we need to work hard together, and we have time. It wouldn't have to be, if we chose to go for some kind of vote on some kind of referendum, it doesn't have to be now. It can be in 2 years when, I think it would take 2 years to get any sort of law even onto the floor of the legislature. So I don't want to shut the book on just what the possibilities are on the books. I want to dream a little bit and see where we can go and who we can get on our side.
Your statement about you're wanting to look for an out-of-the-box solution, that was something that very much imprinted itself on my mind. I remember that statement, and as I've talked to PFM, as I've talked to anybody about this, I always make the point. Oh, by the way, I want you to know that. We're open to anything. I've used that term. Oh, by the way, we are open to just in case you don't understand that we're interested in an outside the box solution to this. I use that phrase, and they kind of laugh sometimes when I say that. But I go, I don't want to find myself in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, and have you tell me, well, why didn't you say you were open to an out-of-the-box solution? Well, I'm telling them that now. And at this point in time, we can talk about out-of-the-box solutions, but ultimately we're talking about dollars. And the focus of the first component of the resolution that you approved here was we're making upwards of $3 million of payments each year every year out of our general fund for these certificates of participation. And if we're not going to pay them with general fund, how many other sources of funding are there out there? And, we get a mix of state and federal funds. In most cases, all those state and federal funds, certainly there's local funds as well in terms of our local levies. But in terms of most state and federal funds, there are very rigid requirements as to how those monies are to be spent. So it's not like we could say, we'd like to go spend some Title I dollars on these COPs. That would not be permissible. And every time we go around this question, it comes back to, okay, if it's not going to be general fund funding that's going to pay for these, the only thing that we can come up with is it's debt service levy. And like I said, it's not debt service levy that we could choose to do next year, because to do that, under current law, we'd have to have a referendum that would be approved, or if we were looking to make those payments out of debt service fund without a referendum, that would require a change in state law. But I'm trying to be as vigilant as I can be on this to make sure everybody who's involved with this knows we're not just looking for the traditional easy resolutions to something like this. We're open to anything, at least in terms of discussion or consideration. And so they know that, and so far we've not come up with anything other than the debt service fund levy.
May I follow up with that? I was impressed by Ms. Krivogorski. I apologize if I slaughter your last name. Sorry. But that she took the initiative to come up with firms that may help us tackle that. Are you going to follow up with those firms, perhaps? I mean, we need to make a resolution that you call them up, or is that something you can do?
I'd be happy to follow up with them, and if there's any individual or any organization that any of you board members are aware of that you've spoken to that thinks that they have an idea that we ought to consider, I'd very much like the opportunity to follow up on that.
Well, I would really like you to follow up on her leads, because I haven't had any personally. So,
okay.
But thank you for that.
Member Sandsted.
Thank you. I just want to say we appreciate the work you've put into this and the conversations you've had, and that you are taking this with an open mind. And I do think that this is something on all of us, especially because we are looking for creative solutions. So anybody who's got ideas, they're welcome. We're not requiring Doug do this all independently. So thank you, Mr. Hassler.
Thank you. Was there another?
There's
one other thing.
The balance of the memo that I provided to you addresses the second priority that the board expressed in the resolution, and that is to coming up with any alternatives that might exist to our existing repayment structure, which would go beyond those payments that we make out of our general fund. And again, all of this resolution has been shared with PFM. Happy to share it with anybody. And basically, the only opportunity that we are aware of out there would be something that you've already heard of, which is a refunding. You've done refundings before. I know you've done them as recently as in 2015 and 2016. Again, under current law, there are some restrictions that are associated with that. Generally, when you do what is called an advance refunding, which is basically a refunding of a bond or a COP issue that has not yet reached its call date, where holders of that debt are basically protected against us making early payment on it until a certain date comes, and those dates on all of our existing debt issues have not yet come. They range from as early as February of 2019 to February of 2027, and for any of those issues that we would decide to pursue a refunding on, state law requires that we have savings, total what are called net present value savings of 3% or better. And the two issues that were done in 2015 and 2016 met that standard, and our financial advisors are certainly tracking all of our debt and looking at it in comparison to what the prevailing interest rates are in the market for this kind of debt to identify opportunities for us to do further refundings, but at this point in time, no such opportunities exist. But we'll continue looking.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Well then, seeing no other lights or no other items on the agenda, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Member Sandsted, seconded by Member Oswald. All in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you. 5-minute break, and then we'll have the HR.
Okay, let's get started with the Human Resources Committee. First item, as always, is the staffing report. I was delighted to see a second Spanish immersion teacher for kindergarten filling a kindergarten spot there, and I think we've got our full group of immersion teachers now. I think, yep, here's an Ojibwe for the second and third grade as well, so that's great. Does anybody else have staffing items? Member Oswald.
I have two questions. In certified retirements, Jackie Lemieux is listed. She was also listed on last month's agenda. Is something, are we just approving her twice?
No, I'll double check that.
I did, just so you know. And then under non-certified permanent increase, Sandra Benson is listed as, we're upping her from 0.8 to 1.0 as an office support specialist at Lakewood. Was she assigned there last month? Because I know this is a new position for her, so I didn't see where she was actually awarded that position first before she gets an increase.
This is the awarding of it.
Okay.
So when we have an individual who's a current person in the same bargaining unit,
okay,
and they take a new position of which there's been posted and then they've accepted, if there's a change in the increase, such as hers, it went from the 0.8 up to the 1.0, it is put in as a permanent increase because she's staying in the clerical, there's no change to her clerical, and for her it's the exact same clerical class.
Okay, but we didn't have to see that she was actually awarded that position? That's more my question. She wasn't in the staffing report last month as being awarded that position?
No,
So we wouldn't have seen it?
Because this is the awarding of the position, because it's basically a lateral transfer for her.
Okay. And my last question, I'm sorry, I had three, is I'm confused on the non-certified termination for the maintenance school custodian, that it's effective on 8/30/17. Is he continuing to work now, even though we were telling him he's not good enough to be permanently employed?
I believe that's a typo.
Okay.
It should be 8/3/17.
Okay, well, I hope to see that corrected. Thank you.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
My questions are under the certified appointments, and I see that we have two new positions at Lincoln Park. One is the grade 6 MTSS coordinator, and then the other is a guidance counselor. And I was just hoping you could kind of talk about those two new positions a little bit more. I'm glad we have them at Lincoln Park.
Okay, yes. Well, last year at Lincoln Park, we had, I'm not going to say this as an experiment, I don't want to explain it that way, but last year we did have a social worker that we used with funds that could support the general population of the school. And this year, that person had since resigned to take another position. In re-examining it, they opted to try with this counselor this year. And to see how that would work with the students out there at that site.
Okay, and I think we're talking about Mr. Nakbar, or not Nakbar, but not okay.
Yeah,
and so will this person continue to be involved with the home visit program?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, and then the second one was just the MTSS coordinator.
Yeah, it's basically a intervention type support position out at the site, dealing with reading and at the elementary side of things.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Member Welty.
Mrs. Horsey, can you give me the rough idea how many teachers we laid off, and how many of them remain laid off, and how many we invited back?
Actually, that's a report I'm working on and off for Mr. Hassler over here. Right next to me. I don't have that right in front of me right now, but I'd be more than happy to report on that at the school board meeting or the next meeting if you'd like.
Do you have any numbers in your head that you could pass on before you make the official report?
Well, right now we have not rehired more than we had retire at that time.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Swirsky. All right, seeing no other lights on this portion, I am going to move on to number 2, the action items for the approval of the Education Directors Association Collective Bargaining Agreement. Mr. Swirsky handed out copies, so you have the physical copies in hand here of these contracts. And this is a 2-year, two-year agreements like we did with the teachers, and they are redlined. This agreement really affects a handful of positions. Am I right about that,
I believe
Mr.
it's 4 or 5 individuals.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to do to introduce these?
It's actually, in terms of changes, it's mainly the dates that have changed. We did do a change in the contract when we talk about leaves and who can use them, and we've changed the, let's see, the definition on family, it would be on page 8 here, G, family leave. In the past, we've used what the city of Duluth has used for their registered domestic partners, and now with the changes in some of the state laws on that, that's no longer necessary with spousal arrangements. So. And then as far as the increases on the 2 years, on the first 2 years, it's 1.5, and on the second 2 years, the increase is 2 and 2.
Okay. Member Welty.
Mr. Swirsky, I think you said you made some changes having to do with leaves? I don't see a red line change here.
Yeah, it's on family leaves on page 8 of that contract of the 1719.
Oh, is that the one? Okay, that's the registered domestic partner?
Yeah.
You said this only affects 4 or 5 people, perhaps none of them even have a registered domestic partner. I presume this is language that you're anticipating making on a number of other contracts as we go along?
Correct. We've had that in other contracts, and we're making those changes.
Okay. And can you tell me what a registered domestic partner is and when that change went about in state law?
Well, actually, it was a Duluth language, and the Duluth city recognized registered domestic partners for their family leave, and we basically adopted that for our contracts.
Can you tell me exactly what this is less than a civil union, but it's still legalized. How does the state?
It only.
Can I simply, this is the predecessor to same-sex marriage. So now that we have same-sex marriage permissible in the state,
I gotcha. Okay.
We don't need this language anymore.
Thank you.
Yeah. Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I appreciated that you sent out by email these earlier today, and with some comments that you just went over right now. And page 1 does highlight the 4 positions that fall under this: the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, the Director of Assessment and Evaluation, Director of Special Services, and the Assistant Director of Special Services, just so everyone's clear on that. Thank you again for sending it out.
Member Johnston.
Yeah, my interest did get piqued. The domestic partner issue. So are you saying now that the only way there can be any kind of benefits is if somebody has to be married and there is no longer any acknowledgement of any domestic partners of any sort?
Well, in many of our contracts, there's recognition of family leave, and it's been pretty standard, not just for our contracts, others, is the definition of what family is, and that's been spelled out in our contracts. We actually branched out in terms of using what would be recognized as a domestic partner at that time by mirroring what the city of Duluth had, because it was a method of having some sort of standard that everybody could be held to, I guess, in terms of what that was. So basically, more recently, with the changes in the state statutes of marriage and partnerships, that language was no longer needed anymore.
No, I understand. I'm not complaining
Yep.
about this. This is certainly the right thing to do, but just making a comment in general. Our society no longer seems to be recognizing domestic partners unless you're married, which seems to me is very discriminatory. But, that's another topic, so thank you.
All right. I don't see any other lights, and so that is it for that item, and we don't have any informational or future items at this point. So that wraps up the HR committee.
Thanks. We will jump directly into business. Mr. Hassler, looking at the financial reports 1A through 1G, APU projections will be coming up and resuming in October. Is there anything specific of note that you have within that area?
There is not, but I would like to make sure it's a little further down on the agenda, but I wouldn't want to overlook providing a staff or a board member with the lease document for Great Lakes Office Solutions. I think those were handed out to a number of you. Do you all have that? If you don't, I've got copies with me right now.
I see. I think that's great.
We think we've all got it? Good, okay. Yeah, there was nothing else that I had to add.
And the for expediency, we'll questions 1A through 1G. If not, we'll move on. Member Oswald.
Oh, I was going to ask about the copiers. Is that now or later?
That's a little further down on the agenda. We'll get there.
Thank you. On 1A through 1G. All right, moving on. No, there are no bids, quotes, or RFPs. That's correct. Policies, the unpaid meal charges. This is the second reading of this. We had significant discussion last month. Members of the board, are there any questions on the second reading of this policy? Member Sandstead.
I just wanted to say thank you because I see a change. We had sort of a perhaps contradiction in the reading between, I think it was 2A and C, and that looks a lot better to me. So thank you for
You're welcome.
Changing the language there for clarity.
Thank you. Superintendent.
Yeah, just also wanted to speak to, I believe it was Member Sandstead who brought up the idea of allowing people to donate their end-of-year balance. And so I brought that up with our food service department, and they're going to look into what exactly that would look like and if they'd be able to figure something out.
Great idea. Thank you. All right, seeing no further lights, we will move on to 4A1, City of Duluth Sand and Salt Materials Agreement. Mr. Hassler.
We have had an informal arrangement with the City of Duluth for a number of years where we have been able to take advantage of picking up, using the sand and salt that they have on hand during the winter months. I believe at one point in time we had our own supply, and there were some significant challenges with us maintaining that supply. So we've found it has worked very well for us to be able to pick up the sand and salt that we need from the city, and that has been an informal arrangement for a number of years. And at the city's request, and in fairness, they believe that we should have a formal agreement to that effect, and we are in agreement with that and are bringing it to you for your consideration.
Great. Questions on that, board members? I think it sounds like a smart idea. Good job. All right, no lights on that. Next, we're moving on to the Duluth Community School Collaborative and Duluth Public Schools for Denfeld Collaborative position. Item number 17. Would we?
This is an agreement with the collaborative specific to the position that will exist at Denfeld, where they will employ that person, they will compensate that person, and we will be reimbursing them in an amount of $50,000. But that will be their employee and not ours. But by this agreement, we would commit to reimbursing them for that cost.
And to be clear, this is a part of the strategic investments that the board made within our budget considerations for the 2017-2018 school year, correct?
Yes, and towards the implementation of the
Full-service community.
full-service community schools. There we go.
Thank you. Member Sandsted.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're playing a role at all in the hiring, or if that's going to be totally the collaborative, if you know the answer.
Superintendent?
Principal Sconiers is part of the team, and I believe there's some other staff involved with that team. I know that they're doing interviews this Wednesday, and they're very excited to have what looks like a strong pool of candidates to choose from.
Member Oswald?
I'm confused as to how this agreement fits in with the later MOU on page 80, 84, or 81 through 85, where at the top of page 85, it lists for the funding that Myers-Wilkins Site Coordinator is employed and funded by the Duluth Community School Collaborative. Lincoln Park Site Coordinator is employed by Duluth Public Schools and funded through Lincoln Park School budget. And then the Denfeld Site Coordinator is going to be employed by the Duluth Community School Collaborative position funded by Duluth Public Schools and Denfeld. Why is Denfeld getting a Duluth Community Schools position and yet we're funding them? I mean, I'm kind of confused as to why all of these people are funded differently and how that all works with the individual grants and how does, how did Duluth Community Schools Collaborative come to being under an umbrella organization? I'm lost. So help me.
Can we pass to the superintendent for some background? Great.
Yep. Well, you're probably most familiar with the Myers-Wilkins or Grant Collaborative that became the Myers-Wilkins Collaborative, and their director for years was Kathy Bogan, and now Jen Eddy, who was an employee of the Collaborative. When we expanded that to Lincoln, we were doing so with legislative monies that were made available, and when we wrote that grant, our understanding would be that the position would be much like it is at Myers-Wilkins, that it would be a collaborative employee, and that we would contract with the collaborative. The way that the legislation was written, it had to be a school district employee. And so that was revised, and so the Lincoln position became a district employee because of the funding stream that said she had to be a district employee. That legislative funding has gone by the wayside. However, she remains a district employee and is going to be paid with title funds. And so that's why that's a district employee. And then when we went to the Duluth Collaborative, so no longer just overseeing Myers-Wilkins, but they're overseeing the entire district. So our long-range view is that it would be best to have them be employees of the collaborative with us contracting for those services, because it provides more flexibility with the funding sources that can be sought for grant funding and things. They can apply for grants that we as a public entity can't always apply for. So we had a lot of discussion about, do they want to have that be a district employee or a collaborative employee, and they opted to go with a collaborative employee with mutual oversight.
And so we're paying $50,000 for the Denfeld person to be employed at Denfeld through the collaborative.
Yep.
And that's our share. Now, you just mentioned that the Lincoln Park one is paid with title funds. Is that part of their allocation of title funds, or is that separate from the school allocations?
They chose to, that's part of their discretionary.
Part of what they're awarded?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's not taking away from anybody else? Okay.
Member Leffler-Kemp?
I was just going to add, besides Principal Sconiers, do we have any other staff that are involved with the collaborative board? I thought we did. Mm-hmm.
Yep. we have redefined a bit the civic engagement coordinator position to be the Duluth Collaborative Connection. And so Tom Albright will be working with the collaborative very closely, and also doing some of the continuing work of civic engagement and some of the political pieces when we go down to the Capitol and such. But he will be really focusing his attention on the full-service community schools and on building those partnerships. Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you. Member Johnston.
Sure, a couple questions. The first one is, when we first got a PowerPoint, not the first, but the last one I remember a couple of years ago about community schools, and it sounds really good, but I was under the understanding that there's some kind of a national organization doing that, and so what does the relationship between the Duluth Community School Collaborative and or our Duluth Public Schools and this, is that correct to say it's a national organization?
There is a national organization. I see it more as a movement. And actually they were just here, was it last month already? A month ago, from Washington, D.C. There were reps here working with us at a local level because, well, Duluth is kind of out in front on this, and having Myers-Wilkins and their history of over 20 years of this work has really gotten a lot of attention. And so they were here not only to help us to expand what we're doing, but to learn from us as well. So we did have a team. The mayor also went by invitation to Washington, D.C., and worked on our full-service community school plan as a community.
That sounds real good, and I guess I'm wondering, though, do we pay them? Is there a franchise fee, anything like that? Is that just something they're coming down and saying, okay, they obviously helped us start it, and now they're learning from us, and that's good, but there is no other financial and or legal connection that we have with this national. It's all been devolved locally now, and other than the interest that they have, but there's no other connection, financial, legal, otherwise, with this national group?
They're federally funded.
Oh,
so
they are?
It's, they receive grant money and they also receive federal funds. So it's not a independent organization or a company. If you will. It's not like
some
a
kind of a
franchise.
quasi-government thing. They get money from there, and then they just reach out how they can.
I'll have to look up the name of the organization. It's slipping my mind, but I'll get it to you.
Okay. The other question I had is that these seems good, and if I recall, just correct me, that this has to be approved by MDE. Is that correct? If we say going on with another school, that would have to go through MDE approval, or I guess I'm trying to find out, could we do more of these, or do we have to be approved? Is there a limit to what this is a national organization and or MDE would allow, or where is that? Who makes those decisions, and what kind of flexibility would we have for future collaborative schools with other schools?
Well, we make those decisions. It's not the only reason we went through MDE with the Lincoln position is because it was the state legislature was providing the funding for that. They're no longer providing that. It wasn't included in this biennium's funding, and so we're on our own. But we were before it was funded by the state as well, and we just, because we believe it's important work, that's why we've expanded it to Lincoln and to Denfeld. In the future, we would like to see more schools included. We started with those that we believe have the most need, but didn't want to go too too fast. We want to do it slowly so that we can do it right.
Okay, so it is kind of an option if that's a budget issue because it is costing us a person here. And we think that's a good usage, but the expanding it would be another budget discussion on that. Thank you.
Member Sandsted?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that a little bit because I was in a meeting with the community school, I think over a year ago now, with the district-wide group, and the plans to expand, the idea is that every school might benefit from a community school collaboration, but it also it's worked so well at Myers-Wilkins because it was sort of done by the community and the families rather than the district implementing it. And so I think that that's sort of a balance they weigh when they're looking at whether or not to expand to other sites, is whether or not there's going to be that sort of support of families and the neighborhood rather than the district just coming in and saying, okay, we're going to do this school and that school and make it sort of a naturally developed thing.
Member Lefferkamp?
Yeah, just to kind of add to the discussion, the national organization presented lots of different examples about how community schools operate around the country, and having an umbrella, if you will, like we now has been created in Duluth, is pretty common with the different versions of this around the country as well. And I again, personally, I'm just really excited. I've done a lot of research over the years on community schools, and look forward to continuing to see versions of this happen throughout all of our schools. And I know we have a lot of legislative support with our local legislators for the community school concept and ideas, and we're fortunate to have some really committed staff currently working with us. I look forward to whoever is chosen by the Denfeld folks. So,
to be clear, the national organization, correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent, didn't help build ours. It was an independent organization of independent community partners in the neighborhood that partnered with the school to raise support for students. So it wasn't, no one came in and parachuted in and helped us build it. It was the East Hillside Community Club that really partnered with the school district, and then, they helped build that building next door. There's the breadth of leadership that my neighborhood has helped do has been significant. Okay, just want to make sure that's clear. Member Welty.
Thank you, Chair Harla. I'm delighted that the mayor and the city are paying attention to these neighborhoods, and this is an excellent group to work with. But, Superintendent, did I get you right? That we, the school district, sent the mayor to D.C. to work with us? Oh, okay, good. I hadn't heard that before, so that's not the case.
Superintendent?
It was with the Coalition for Community Schools. It's with the U.S. Department of Education through the Institute for Educational Leadership, and they were funding it. So they only had so many spaces, and so people from the collaborative went, people from Myers, from Lincoln, from Denfeld, and then representative from the city. It happened to be the mayor.
Member Oswald.
I'm just not clear on the actual goal of a community school. Is it to increase academic achievement, or is it something else?
Superintendent?
Well, in the end, it's all about student achievement, but it's really recognizing that our students have different levels of need depending on where they are, and it's based on the community. It's about going into the community and addressing needs that need to be met, so that kids can come to school ready to learn without thinking about having a toothache or being hungry or not being sure where they're going to be, or mental health needs. And it's about engaging the entire community and meeting the needs of families so that they can come to school ready to learn. And that's really what it's about. So yes, it's about student achievement, But the work of the collaborative is about meeting the needs of the community so that the kids can learn.
Sure. And so my follow-up to that is, how do we know we're doing a good job?
Well, it's about going back to the community to see if we're meeting those needs. And I think when we look at the Myers-Wilkins community and the work of the collaborative there, they're involved with so many different organizations, with Community Action, with LISC, with Workforce Duluth. Whatever the needs of the community are, they are being responsive to that. So if it's about learning, families learning how to manage their money so that they can have stable housing or anything that they're addressing, that's where they got the community health nurse.
Health worker.
Yeah, community health worker, thank you. Because that was addressed as a need. They needed a connection at the school to be able to address those. So it's about starting off with a needs assessment, and that's over the past year, that's what Lincoln has really been engaged in, is that needs assessment and starting to identify partners that can meet those needs, and that'll be part of the work at Denfeld as well.
Well, and the reason I ask is I know Myers-Wilkins, formerly Grant Collaborative, Community Collaborative, it's been around for a long time, and they do tremendous work, and I'm in no means trying to dissuade anybody from participating in that. I'm just concerned that achievement levels have remained steady or dropped. You know, they're not going significantly in any direction. You know, and so can you argue, are we supporting them to maintain, or are we, can we give them something different so they can achieve more? I don't know the answer, but I just want to make sure that we're building quality programs and not just perpetuating a status quo. I want to see change in happening, because we need to do things that affect change to improve people's futures, and I want to be able to have some data and results and make sure that we continue to be focused on the goal of getting our kids through school more prepared. And however that's going to come about, I hope we get yearly reports, because and that's always going to be my question is show me that we're doing better. So I highly encourage and support them all. So it's not trying to say anything negative about them, but I want to challenge them to always be focused on the prize.
Superintendent.
And I think with any educational data, it's true to have really clean data, because there are so many variables, and we don't know what the results would be without doing what we're doing. So if we took the supports of a collaborative away, we don't know what that would look like after 20 years of them being in place. But there is also staff development that we have in place, and we're putting MTSS and professional learning communities, and so there's all of these things that go into helping our students, and we can never really know which, unless we completely isolate them and only provide one intervention, we don't know the true outcome. And so maybe it's not one intervention, but the collection of interventions. It's the dental health services, it's the mental health, it's the medical, it's the food that we're providing for breakfast and lunch, and some of our programs over the weekends and dinners, and it's about that full service. Maybe that's what's helping these students to succeed as well as they are. I do know that we have a lot of students that live in extraordinary circumstances, and we can always provide more supports. But I understand what you're saying about not being sure about, is it this? And I'm not sure we can know.
I just want to make a quick comment that it's about, they do a lot of addressing the social determinants of health, or social determinants of success. So kids having that baseline, in the last year since Lincoln Park had Rachel Tappa that was there, they finally had someone that had the capacity to address questions that were all throughout my campaign 4 years ago about transportation to the top of the hill, and now there's a DTA route up to the top. And it didn't take just one meeting or a quick phone call. It was something that a lot of folks have been talking about, but they helped to make those strategic connections to have that success. Now, pairing that with that home visiting program and other things being present at the school, along with all of those, so we can focus on academics, and in partnership, they're focusing on social determinants of success, then we can find partnerships to have that baseline, and as well as helping parents find jobs. And there's so many different potential. I just, in seeing that, that was one key thing that I've been like super excited about this year. But even hearing from some of my neighbors talk about how they have students in their classrooms, or they directly have been affected by the support of the collaborative, has been really helpful to hear. And then also hearing from those parents from an early age say, our students have this support in elementary school, but we want to see it grow with them through middle and high. And so it's neat to see that we have that track for support all the way through, where they may not have that opportunity within their families. So,
Member Stanton,
thinking
could you
about
indulge
it a
me
lot.
to comment again?
Excuse me.
Okay, I was just asking Member Stanton if I could just
Member
respond to
Oswald?
what you just said. Is that I agree with you totally. I think all of us have been around a community school table at one point or another in the past couple of years, and we've fought hard, and we won on a bus line to Lincoln Park. But I have to say, I have heard from a number of West Duluthians that are not happy about that bus line, because it stops and starts at Lincoln and only goes east. And there are many people that want that bus to go to Lincoln, out in Gary and out in Morgan Park and out in West Duluth and Smithville and everywhere west of the Ordox. So it's only half of the student population, I would guess, roughly, that is going to be able to get that service, and have to transfer and be more complicated than that. It's really frustrating. So having a bus route, yay, we have to get it expanded now so we can service an entire school, not part of a school.
Which is where it's great that we have someone that we're continuing to support there. Member Sandstead.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to what we consider achievement also, and how we're measuring that. And I frankly think that measuring students on a test they take on one day is not a good way to assess whether or not we've made any progress, or that we're helping more of our students or more of our families. And so the memorandum of understanding actually lays out very well the goal, the objective. Paragraph 3 talks about the primary objective, and it also talks about the responsibility of assessing the data and assessing the success of the community school program at each site, and then program-wide. And I think if you look at their objective to provide wide variety of integrated supports to both children and families, and you look at that more broadly than a particular test score, they're able to show a significant success. And I know you've talked to Myers-Wilkins families, Member Oswald, like I have, that absolutely love having a collaborative there. And just that strengthening of the relationship with parents and families, I think, is a huge success that may or may not have any reflection in a test score. So anyway, strong supporter.
Thank you. Member Leffler-Kemp.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Member Stansted, going to page 83 and 84, where it talks about the role of the school coordinators, and then also the kind of what they're focused, their actual day-to-day, what they're focused on doing, because it really lays out, the many ways that they work within not only the school, but within the community. I also appreciated you highlighting the in community engagement. To me, that's one of the exciting pieces of what happened a month ago when the national folks came in, the community engagement piece, as well as what happens with the site coordinators. Is their goal is to bring neighbors as well as parents and community members to work with our schools, and I think that's really exciting, and they've done a phenomenal job. I'm looking forward to seeing how that happens even more fully out at Denfeld as well.
Member Johnston?
Yeah, thanks for kind of bringing me back to some of these goals. One of the things I noticed, which I have to ask about, is number 25 on page 82, which is provide current fiscal audit annually. Is that already being done, or what does that mean? Because it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of money that's there, but could somebody explain maybe what that is or what that would entail?
Superintendent?
As a nonprofit organization, they're required to have an audit, and they provide us with that paperwork and provide it to the public on an annual basis.
I'm sorry, you don't have your light on, so we can't hear you.
Sure. Oh, if we could just share that with the board when that comes in, it would be appreciated.
I can ask them for a copy and forward that.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further lights, we'll move on to Krista Haryu, mental health consultant, supporting groups of children with classroom staff with disabilities in order to provide social and emotional well-being for children in Head Start. A continued contract, correct, or is this a new contract? Okay. I think isn't it continued? I can't remember.
I'm not sure if it's a new one or not.
Number 3, if Krista Haryu is a continued contract, if this is new. Just can't remember. Yes, it's new, or yes, it's...
Oh, sorry. Yes, this is a continuation
Okay.
of the
Thank
position that they've had, and it comes through each year.
Okay. Thank you. Questions on that contract? Seeing no lights, we'll move forward. There are no placeholders or other change orders. A question within change orders to Mr. Spooner. Do you foresee any coming up, or are things moving along with a number of our processes this summer?
Things are moving along very well. We will have one change order for Stowe Elementary Playground. There's some adds and some deducts. It's not going to be huge. It might be $2,000, but things are going along well.
Okay. Thank you. We'd expect to see that next month likely then?
I'm holding it till the project is completed, so it will probably be done in 3 weeks, just how the time lines up, if it's September or October when I bring it to the board.
Great. Thank you very much. Seeing no lights on that. Moving on to leases, the Great Lakes Office Solutions. This is where we did have the additional thing printed out. This is for the pilot program for leasing.
If I could say
Printers.
a few things, share some thoughts with the board on this. In our school district, the expense associated with copiers is paid out of building funds. It's paid out of their allocation of monies. And for quite some period of time, I can't say exactly how long, but we've been in a process where we have typically been purchasing refurbished copiers. So copiers that have been out there, have been used, have some years on them, have been refurbished, and that's what we purchased. And those have been that has been consistent with our budgetary capacity. In recent years, some buildings have expressed concern with, when you get that 5-year refurbished copier, they're encountering issues. It's not the quality that some would like, and there is some reason to believe that even though our cost of acquisition for that is less than what a new copier would be, there's other costs that go along with maintaining a refurbished copier, and or the hassle factor of a copier being down and having to get a service call to get it up and running, and in the meantime, how does your staff handle the copy needs that they have? So kind of as a pilot project, we are proposing a lease of 3 new copiers at Ordine East. The cost of this would be paid out of Ordine's budgetary allocation, and we want to see what our experience is with this, and whether or not this is a path that we should go down with other buildings if we find that it is cost effective for us to do so. We're kind of excited about the opportunity of having some brand new machines, being able to avoid some of the breakdown issues. There will be breakdown issues, there always are, but we don't expect that there will be nearly as many in those first 5 years. And then beyond that first 5 years, we think we'll have the capacity to use that copier beyond that 5-year period, which effectively is about the age of the typical copier that we've been acquiring in the past.
Great.
So this is a new approach that we want to take a look at, and we'll see how it goes. And in the meantime, Ordine is going to be responsible for paying that cost out of their budgetary allocation.
So they're piloting it, and it could be a system that should it work out in a better system, it could be replicated should other buildings.
It absolutely could be. I mean, the bottom line will need to be that whatever building is interested in moving in that direction, they need to have the ability to pay for that cost, because in terms of the upfront cost, this is a greater cost than what we would have for a refurbished copier. But we think there's justification for that, and we think it'll be a good approach in the long term. We'll have to see, and it is something we can replicate in other buildings.
Thank you. Member Oswald?
You kind of hit on where I was going, or was going to start going, in that I understood that each building has to pay for their own copiers. And so you're saying that Ordine is going to still pay for their own copier, and so why are we being told about this if it's not anything different? It's just they're choosing to purchase new versus lease, or new versus old.
You're being told about it because it's a new lease, so it needs to come to the board. It is new from the standpoint that we've typically purchased refurbished units, so we wanted you to be aware of that. But beyond the building responsibility to pay for their copiers, you're right, that's nothing new. But we do think it's something that could be a valuable experience for us.
So, and the result of this is if they have much less problems and it goes much more smoothly, is this going to become like general practice that we recommend that all schools purchase new instead of refurbished? Or is this still always just going to be a building choice as to what fits in their budget?
At this point in time, I think what we would look, if we find this to be a successful implementation, I wouldn't see us necessarily dictating to buildings that they have to do that approach, because there is some pro and con here. The con is they're going to have a greater fixed cost than what they would have. Now the uncertainty is how many breakdown issues are they going to have, which one would assume would be less. But we think buildings should be, if this is a successful implementation, we think buildings should have the choice of being able to work with either one of those options, as long as they can make either option work within their budgetary allocation, give them the choice.
And they didn't necessarily have that choice before that? Was it always that they should buy refurbished?
Well, they've not had that choice for copiers in the past, and there is some reluctance to extend out into multiple budget years a cost that who's to say what the budgetary allocation will be for Ordine in 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Right.
There are no guarantees. But the building principal is very supportive of this and is committed to making it work no matter what may transpire with future budget year allocations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, we'll move on to resolutions, placeholder for the Hills. That'll stay a placeholder. Just a note, I think this is the second month we need to make sure that the numbers are included in the final packet for the resolution numbers. So they're not present on here. So just a note for Jackie, because last month she had to reprint a thing to make sure that the items were on there. So just a note about details for that. Next, move on to acceptance of donations. Any questions for that, board members? Authorized bank account signers. Any questions? Resolution entering the joint powers agreement between ISD 709 and the State of Minnesota Purpose Center for the Arts Education. This is a standard contract that we have every year. Correct? Yeah, any questions on that? Not seeing any lights there. 35, election of school board members calling a primary, so just ensuring that. No. Any questions on that resolution? No. Note on the date, Tuesday the 12th. All right. And then approval election of judges at polling sites. Any questions on that? Member Oswald.
I just have a brief question. Are these the only people that can be election judges, or do somebody like the town of North Star have like Ray get sick and have a substitute come in? I mean, do those situations happen? Okay.
We don't know. I think I would say Member Leffler.
Yeah, I don't know for a fact, but just from my work with the League of Women Voters over the years, I think the way Jeff Cox from the city sets up election judges, they have it's set up in a way if something like that situation should happen. The numbers that they allocate to different sites and how they're set up. Again, I don't have all the details on it, but just through my background with the league and knowing a little bit what he has done, I think they have to be trained. There's things they have to go through to be an election judge.
And I think it's actually answered in the resolution, as pointed out by Member Sandstead. Do you want to?
Yeah, the last paragraph, the last sentence of the first paragraph, if anyone is unable to serve, the clerk is empowered to substitute the name of a qualified legal voter for one that is unable to serve.
Okay, there we go. Which then would have them also need to be trained as well, too. So, making the superintendent.
I just wanted to point out, because it's something different for everybody involved, on page 39, the very last line, that the city of Rice Lake will be, the polling place will be Homecroft Elementary, because the community center fire hall is being remodeled and is not available. So for this particular primary, they will be at Homecroft Elementary.
Thank you.
As well, right.
And for the general election as well, too. Thank you. Member Oswald.
I just have a question to that. So how are we going to navigate our security procedures at that site with the general population coming in to vote?
Good question. Superintendent?
I know that the principal and staff are coming up with a plan for that. I know that we talked about it, and they're going to come up with procedures to take care of that.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no further lights, moving on to expenditure contracts. Questions on expenditure contracts? Member Sandstead?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I see that the guide K-12 looks to be some software on playing with population and demographics, which is exciting, right? We're going to have somebody internal kind of with the using the software to play around a bit. Is that where we're headed? Superintendent? Question.
That is exactly what that software is. It's actually useful in a lot of different ways. It will allow us to import our data, any kind of data, and map it. So we could also use it to identify where would the best place to hold a summer program be, where we can we're trying to figure out how to use it for attendance as well, like how we could map attendance on any given day. And also we can look at transportation, we can look at boundaries, and so we do have an initial training coming up for some key district staff who will be trained on how to use this software. I'll be one of those trainees as well.
Cool. I think it would be, once people have some experience using it, I would enjoy seeing it. So if we put it on the agenda 6 or 9 months from now to just sort of show us what it does, that might be cool. Thanks.
Who would be the staff member in charge of implementing that?
Well, there's a team of us. There's Doug is involved, Bart, Mike Johnson from Transportation, myself, Amy Starzecki, Mike Carey. There's a number of us.
Thanks. Member Oswald.
My question is on the bottom of page 48 about the fees and service. It says that it's based on our most recent FTE enrollment counts, and they say our enrollment count is 8,547. Is that anywhere near close? Because that doesn't seem like the numbers we've heard.
Mr. Hassler?
That is something that I'm trying to refine, and in the meantime, we just wanted to get the ball rolling to make sure that that software is in place for us, and we'll refine that number, and if there's some money that they owe us, we'll make sure that that's a credit to us in the future.
So it's adjustable downward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Member Lefler-Kemp.
I had a question about the School Food Authority and the reimbursable school nutrition program. That was specific for Harbor Cities, what we have in front of us. Will we be receiving information for other schools as well that we provide food service to?
I'd be happy to make sure you have that.
And can you just highlight what other schools that we provide the food service for again?
I might be at a loss to do that in a comprehensive way right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Oswald?
I had a question about Twin Ports testing.
Okay.
If we're finished with Member Lafleur-Kemp's topic.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to know if that is being paid for with facilities money or how that's being paid for and what codes it really is trying to fix. I know it's code work, but.
Mr. Spooner?
If I'm following your question correctly, you're just asking where is it being funded out of, and that's out of LTFM, and it's information needed for design purposes of the site.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a second question about something else, if nobody else has anything. I have a question about the manpower contract on page 78 for a computer programmer. It's my understanding that a computer programming position was posted at least twice and that was unable to be filled. And this is happening at a number of IT postings when it comes to personnel because we can't pay them enough. And yet we end up paying way more to someplace like Manpower instead of just paying an employee more. How can we fix this? Because I would much rather hire somebody for somewhere in between the $28 and $41 than have to fork out $41 to an entity just for their administrative costs and their business growth.
That is something that we've been working with technology on. I think there are some shortcomings associated with not having a full-time person in the position in terms of what you'd want a computer programmer to do. But as you point out, we've tried to post for it in the past, have not been able to find good candidates for it. But I think that is something that we certainly are needing to address in terms of a priority.
Well, I would, and from my understanding, this happens routinely with our IT positions, and so I hope that maybe we I don't know, don't we recalibrate or we have somebody audit whether or not we're appropriately paying our staff at the levels that for the industry. I forget what that's called, but I know we do something like that at some point when this happens, and I hope we consider what we need to do to make sure we have happy staff and are able to fill our roles, because being employed here is better than being a temp person anywhere, I think.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, we'll move on to revenue contracts. There are none. The no-cost contracts, we had a significant discussion about it earlier, so we will keep moving on. There are no change orders. The facilities management and capital project status report, are there any questions on that? Page 87. Member Leffler-Kemp?
Yeah, this is just more of a general question as we're closing up the summer in a few weeks and starting again in the fall. and I know our staff have been working really hard in our buildings, but is there anything that, and this is kind of a broad general question, you feel isn't being accomplished because we don't have enough staff, or we need more staff, or do you feel like the timeline of things is moving along?
Mr. Spooner?
If you're offering up more staff, I would certainly take them. Had to get that in. But in general...
I know they're working really hard, the staff we have. I certainly do know that from knowing some of them.
But
yeah.
to answer your question, we're on track as where we typically would be in August. I don't foresee any issues with being ready for school to start. We, of course, we've had summer school at Denfeld. Denfeld's been very busy. Denfeld's probably a little bit, if you were to walk in Denfeld, you'd say it may not appear that we're ready for school to start in a couple of weeks, but we're using it to its capacity every day. But we have a plan, and we know, and we will attack that building very hard at the end of the month and be ready for school to start.
Thank you. Member Oswald?
My question was around the playground mulch removal. We've noticed, at least I and my community members that I've spoken with have noticed that MacArthur has been unusable from some community member standpoints for an absurd amount of time. I don't see it that way, but when they started with the bulldozer and the dump truck and a shovel and 2 guys and taking care of that mulch, but then I saw that Lowell posted that they suck that stuff up with a vacuum truck. Is that just a prerogative of the construction company trying to make up time? Are they behind? Are they on schedule? Why the difference?
It's means and methods, and when you saw the vacuum truck that didn't work, they're not doing that at any other sites. They contracted that person to do that, and they spent a lot more than they did with a skid steer taking it out. But we are on track. They've got till October 15th to complete the playgrounds. MacArthur, as you mentioned, if I had to guess, I'd say that'll be wrapped up within 2 weeks. All the drainage is in, the rock is back in. They need to put the fabric back on, and then engineered wood fiber. They've got some concrete work to do. A couple poles they damaged, they have to replace, but they're within a couple weeks of being finished. And everything is going in stages right now, but.
And speaking of the drainage at MacArthur, I know that during some of the recent rains that we've had, it's become a swimming pool rather than a playground surface. And the playground monitors that I've talked to said it's always been that way. And so has that been remedied within the scope of this work, or is that something that we may have to look forward to in the future?
No, every site will be scraped down to subgrade to grade, and then new drainage is going in, so I don't anticipate any problems. The slopes are correct. Luke and Allison from SAS Plus Associates are doing an excellent job. They're diligent. They're on site every day. They're checking elevations. I think we'll have great project when it's done.
Thank you.
I was worried about comments like that from the summer when you said, to be clear, all of our playgrounds will be closed all summer. So I think it's a good, it's a reminder for us for what we learned, and can hear what community members are saying, but we were definitely public about it being a long process.
Right.
Mr.
I mean,
Spooner?
the contractor has the ability, they have the playgrounds till October 15th. Mm-hmm. It's a bonus to us if they're open before that, and they will be open before, and some will be open before that, but I can't tell them they have to open them before that, so.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, there are a couple of future items of note: the Energy Steams contract, emergency management program, a discussion on the transition to paperless process for the board book. I remember last year when I was chairing the board, we asked for kind of an overview of how much it costs to actually mail out these books, and moving to the potential of utilizing more technology. So an item to come. I'm very encouraged by. As well as levy certification and policy updates. So with that, we will adjourn. Oh, Superintendent.
I was just going to respond to your paperless process. I know Melinda has done a lot of work, and she's tried out some devices, and she ordered a cordless mouse, and she got that, and now has found the right software that will allow you to highlight and take notes and call it up. And so we are good to go.
Great. Thank you. We will adjourn.